Hi everyone, welcome back to the Wonder of Anime podcast. I'm your host, Lisa. I am a multimedia anime content creator, and my work spans across my blog, my YouTube channel, and of course, this podcast. I am, of course, as always, so excited for this week's episode and this week's guest. I have someone who, actually, this is the first time we've ever spoken in this way, but we actually talk online all the time. And his name is The Wolf's Den. You may recognize him from a bunch of things. The Wolf's Den is a podcast host, beat maker, and lover of JRPGs. He hosts the podcast Menu Combat, and he previously has hosted the podcast Nerds on Hip Hop with a previous guest, Victoria L. Johnson from the Moonies Club. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. It's like we've talked online for so long. It's like nice to actually have.
It's been like a couple years, and I feel like because like we have our mutual friend Victoria, that like I feel like we already like are like this. I'm like just like carried over closeness. You know, people have like parasocial relationships, but this is like kind of like that, but like also I don't know. It's like I feel like when you know someone's cool, and then you're like, oh, they're cool by association. Yeah. But I'm so glad that you came on this podcast because I thought of having you on my podcast because you're someone who I know you like anime, and you primarily, you know, your podcast, and we'll get into your podcast about JRPGs, but you're just like a passionate person online, a positive, passionate person. And that is exactly what I was looking for when I thought of this podcast, because I love people who are passionate about anime and can get into it in the way that like I would get into it. So I did want to go ahead and before we get into the show, just talk a little bit about your journey as a content creator, because you've been on 2 podcasts, but you've also done like live shows with Victoria at different conventions. So how did you start like getting into being a podcast host?
I think so I moved to Baltimore in like 2015-ish, or a little bit earlier than that, but around 2015, I was just like, I feel like disconnected. I was like, I'd been so in love with anime at that time, and I was like, where are my people? Like, you know, sometimes you're at work and so forth, where you're like, these are great people, but these are not like necessarily your people.
Right, my like, people.
Right, and I'm like, man, I want to find my people. I was like, you know what? Me and Victoria had been talking online so much anyways, because I'd moved away from New York, and I was like, you know what, let's do a podcast, and I'm sure this will be like a beacon to find our people. And I think between Nerds on Hip Hop being a place where I fall in love with anime, and that being the place where I feel like I brought both parts of myself together, right? Like, I had all of this anime love, but I was like, I deeply love hip hop, and I'm like, you can get me in a nice hour conversation about that if you want me to. And trying to find folks that walk that line and just like be also just like, as you said, positive, right? Like, it's very easy to go online and do like the full hate thing, and you're like, yeah, but like, talk about the thing that you care about. Like, go in deep, because I always think about the thing that I've had to reflect on is that it is more useful to shed light on the things that you love, because people will slowly latch on and you don't even know it. Like, I remember, I think it was last year, I had mentioned Princess Tutu. I'd loved that for so long, and I had someone just randomly DM me on Twitter. I was like, hey, I bought Princess Tutu strictly off of your love that you've put it online. And I was like, me and this person hadn't interacted much before, but it was just, you put out that energy and you start finding folks who want to share the positive energy and be excited. And I was like, I think that just also is welcoming, right? So I think.
Yes. Also, I'm a huge Princess Tutu fan. I actually have an episode of Princess Tutu. Somebody picked it. So I love that. But I also love that, like, and for you and Victoria, you're speaking, you know, like you both love anime and nerds and then like hip hop, which is such like a juxtaposition because like, you know, hip hop's always been like the cool thing. So you wouldn't necessarily like attribute hip hop fans to also be nerds, like in a superficial sense. Obviously, we're all very multi-dynamic people. And a lot of like, you guys are very like old school, like history hip hop fans. Like, y'all know, you know, the 50 years of hip hop. So it always surprises me when, not surprises me, but like I'll see you talk about something, and I'm like, hold on, let me get my Googles, and I gotta look up what he's talking about. But because it's always like some hip hop artist that's like a pioneer that I had no idea who they were. But I love that you guys, had that like I feel like that jumping off point because you guys now both do content
Yeah.
separately. Which now leads me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is your solo podcast, Menu Combat, which is about JRPGs. But like, how did you get the idea to start on, doing your own podcast about JRPGs?
I think it was one of those things where you sit down. I'll be the one walking around in my apartment and I do like a half an hour just talk to myself to talk through this feeling about RPG. And I'm just like, man, this stuff excites me in such a different way, and I'm like, this is my favorite genre. Like I've jokingly been with a couple of my friend groups. It's like I'll make the joke of like, make it turn based. It doesn't matter what it is. I'll say turn based 2K just to always get people to think about mechanics. But I'm also like, I love what the genre can do, and I also just think that it's the natural connection between anime fans and JRPG fans. Like they're not one and the same, but they're heavily connected, right? Like I've been playing bits of Persona. I'm like, this really is just an anime with RPG elements flipped in between. And so I think between that and then the other pieces that I haven't gotten to play as many RPGs as I wanted because I focus so much on like my work. And so I was like, if I make this a part of my intentional life, I'll go and play more. And I was like, I think that ends up being the healthy outlet. I'm like, if it sits a meaningful part of my life, I can do this thoughtfully.
I love that you said part of my intentional life because that right there, like that is the key. I think, and personally, I know what you do for work. We have to say that, but I think that also combines, some of your different passions. But I always I think when I was younger, like I always kind of fantasized, like I'm gonna have my dream job doing everything. And then at this age where I'm now, where I'm like, my job, I do enjoy my job. I have a great time at my job. I love what I do, but like it's the stuff I do outside of work. Like I'm like, my job is like at the end of the day is like a paycheck, and I'm like, this content, like I don't want to make content creation a full-time job. Like
Right.
my job, like my job funds my content creation, all that stuff that I do. But it is like you said, like intentional, and it's like I love being able to be like, okay, like I'm going to read this manga intentionally for a review, and it's like I would have read the manga anyway. Like I'm still gonna read it, but I'm reading it, and now I get to do like challenge myself and write about it or talk about it. So I love that you said that, and I also think I didn't really know JRPGs. Like I knew of them, but I kind of was like I don't know. Like I always thought of RPG like Dungeons and Dragons. I don't think that's the same thing. Don't come at my life.
You're right. Like anybody who doesn't acknowledge Dungeons and Dragons is the forefather of it all. So you're right.
So I, I learned like Pokemon's basically like a turn-based combat. I had no idea. I've been playing Pokemon since I was 6. So now that you said like I have a friend, and I think I put her onto your podcast. And shout out to me because she also listens to this podcast. She's like into RPGs, and she teaches me like all the things that I didn't know. And I learned that there's also like RPGs that become anime, like they like make them into an anime, and now there's also anime that are like made in art, like it's like you got isekai into RPG game. Yeah. So it's also very interesting to me. And you mentioned Persona, and by the time this episode comes out, I will have had Zeno Robinson on. And we get into a little about how I want to play Persona, but it's not out on the Switch. Persona 3 Reload. And I was like, that's going to be my first, like, really, like, diving into a JRPG. But, without, like, getting too much into it, but I did want to know, what is it about JRPGs specifically that makes it your favorite type of video games?
I think the two things are, and I was like, one is the sense of going on adventure with people, right? Like there are RPGs where it's one character, but like the ones I love are like a party of 7, a party of 8, and they're going through this adventure, and they'll have like moments at campsites, moments where they spend time bonding with another, and it could be totally idiosyncratic about like silly stuff about like I love mushrooms or whatever, and sometimes it could be like engaging with somebody's like this is my trauma, and there's a vastness to how they talk and engage with one another that I think it often I find anime earnest, and I feel like JRPGs carry that earnestness the same way. And I think so. That's one. Two, I just like having multiple people to control. Like, the idea of like having a full party. Like you mentioned Pokemon, I'm like, okay, I got this six. Gotta like make sure like this move, this covers this. Like that kind of strategic thinking is exciting. And also, and this is just for me, I'm actually not that great at games. So I also feel like RPGs are easier to feel like I'm making progress. So like sometimes I'll be playing something, I may not beat something, but I'm like, okay, I leveled up a little bit. It's like I can count it as progress regardless. Sometimes with other games, you're like, you didn't beat this level. You kind of feel like you're stuck exactly where you left behind. And so I think those are three things that get me so excited about RPGs.
It's funny you say that, like, you feel like they're easy because I feel like they're so hard. Like, I look, like, maybe because I'm not used to that kind of style. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, let me just mash buttons and try my best to beat something.
I'm excited for when you get into Persona and hearing your experience because I'm like, I'm at the end of my playthrough of 5, and I'm like, it took me a while to figure out what it was working, and you just kind of like, oh, you just let it be. Like sometimes I don't want to be optimizing my gameplay. I'm like, if it doesn't work out perfectly, it doesn't work out perfectly. That's still fine. And I think that sometimes RPGs allow that grace in a way that other games don't always allow that grace. Sometimes you have to be perfect in other ones.
Yeah, that and I think that's what like I'm interested in, you know, because I'm a story mode like person. Like I love story mode games, and I like, you know, well you know this, like I'm a huge like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom fan, and like Persona and JRPGs in general are just something that I'm like never played, have no idea. I have watched some streams, so I'm like, okay, I can kind of figure out, but it'll be the first time where I'm like in it and like other people, and I'm just like, I'm scared, but I feel like it'll be a good time. I think everybody loves it, and I'm like, well, a lot of people that I like and trust and we have similar interests, like are really into JRPGs, so I feel like it's just the natural progression for me. Like,
Yeah.
we all have a path to follow.
Yes.
As fans of stuff.
Yeah, I'm like, if you've already liked isekai anime, like this is just on the road.
So I don't really like isekai anime. I do like you know, the classics like Inuyasha and stuff like that. And I'm actually really liking Solo Leveling. That is, it's a Korean animation. I mean, it's a Korean based on a Korean webtoon, but it is a Japanese animation, I should say. But it kind of has like those game elements, and I'm just like, I'm getting into it. So I mean, it may be a while because it is on the PS5, and my husband's like, well, you could just get it like on his PS5, and I'm like, no, I want it on my Switch that I own. But that may be, who knows when that's happening. Hopefully soon.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Fingers and toes crossed.
Yeah.
So why you know, obviously you have your JRPG podcast, so we won't be too much here on the JRPG train. Why I actually have you on, and I have you in the expert seat. That's what now call my guests here, to talk about one of your favorite animes. And this anime I'm very excited to talk about because it's like, if you know, you know. Obviously, a lot of people see the Suzume book that I strategically placed here for this episode. So we're going to be talking about 5 centimeters per second, which is one of Makoto Shinkai's earliest works that a lot of people may have seen. Now, you know, while we were getting set up, I did have it pulled up, the wiki, and I know I definitely watched it. Do I remember? No. So that's my history with it. I've definitely seen it, and you know, obviously it being one of the earlier Makoto Shinkai works, a lot of his themes carry throughout, you know, all of his works. And that's how a lot of people are. Like, one of my favorite people is Mamoru Hosoda. And, like, he did a One Piece movie, which I haven't seen. Oh. And then I saw, like, a trailer, and I was like, I bet Mamoru Hosoda did this. And I Googled it, and it was him. I was like, I knew him. Like, you know, like, they have their DNA in it. Yeah. So I'm so excited that you picked this. So I want to ask you, what is 5 centimeters per second?
5 centimeters per second is Makoto Shinkai's second film, and it is extremely short. It's like an hour, little bit over an hour, and it's idea of like three small separate vignettes, and it's really about Takaki and this idea of like pining, and also not just pining, but just like the distance by which people grow apart. So like the three vignettes is as at the beginning, Takaki and Akari are like I think like middle school, around 12 or 13. And it's one of those things where everyone knows that they're in love with each other, but they don't really say so. And there's a lot of like moments where they're running around, like being bullied, but they're like escaping within one another. And they talk about like the very first thing is like the idea of people growing apart is like the 5 centimeters per second, the speed at which like a cherry blossom falls. And so much of that movie is about those two growing apart and Takaki like wrestling with that. In the very first vignette, Takaki, Akari moves away, and then Takaki starts to move very further away, and they start sending letters to each other. And she's doing the, like, it becomes, how do you put it, like this first person narrative, and so she's detailing the small moments of her day, those things that like make you feel connected to someone, where it's like joining this club, what she's like all of that, and he's struggling to respond. And he's like, he never sends a text message, he never does any of that, but they do phone calls apparently. And then there's a moment where, as I say, he's about to move away, and they're like, now that she's far away and he's about to be far away, they want to meet one last time. And it's this long sequence where he takes his train, the train gets stuck in the snow, and he gets stuck in the snow for like hours. And so he gets close to where she is. Mind you, I'm still trying to figure out why do you let your 13-year-old boy do that, but we'll get to that later. And so you're thinking, oh, he missed the connection with her. And he gets there, and he finds her sleeping, and they finally embrace. And it's like they both finally put words or put a connection to what they had both been feeling. But it's also the thing that he says, like, I know that this will not ever happen. It was like the moment where they come together, they acknowledge what their feelings are, but we're both going in separate directions, and we kind of have to accept that. And the second part of the story, he's in a new place, and he meets this girl named Kane. Kane is a surfer, and she's always hunting him down. So like she will like pretend to be leaving at 5 o'clock just so that he comes back from archery. They're going out to like a little convenience stores. They're spending time connected, but she always recognizes that he's typing on his phone to somebody else when they're hanging out. And so she's like, does he have feelings for somebody else? Like, what is... And she's like, okay, do I tell him my feelings? What is really happening here? And for her, her secondary plot is so much about what does she do as she goes older? Like, she's struggling to surf, she's struggling to figure out what to do next, and she ends up, the second story ends up really being about her letting go of those feelings because she recognizes that his feelings are elsewhere. But the other part of it is like, now I can now let myself go into my passion. So like she had been unable to surf for like 2 months properly. She finally catches the wave at the end because she had finally let those emotions go. And then the third part of the story, we have Takaki being way older, I think like 20s, and he's starting to struggle at his job, and he starts, I think the thing that happens in your early 20s where you're like longing for childhood, and so he pairs that with the connection to Akari. And Akari was thinking about sending her a message that she's getting married. She ends up not doing so. And for him, it is very much of, he goes around the town and he's having all the memories of them spending time together. And he has this image of her across the street. A train passes by and he looks back and she's gone. Like, that is really the full thing. And so it is one of those things where it's like, as a plot-wise film, it's not a lot, but it's all just very much the emotions of letting go. And so I hope that like captures like the three vignettes, and it is all mood. Like there is story, there is plot, there are character moments, but it is just so much of just that feeling of separating from people.
That you know, as you were saying that, I feel like I've been confusing 5 centimeters per second with a completely different thing, because I was like, I do recognize the first part that you're talking about. Like, I definitely have seen that because I remember the part in the like where they meet at the station, the snow or whatever. Like, I remember that, but the other parts was not what I was thinking of. And now I'm wondering if what I was thinking about is by Makoto Shinkai at all. I think it is. Hold on. Let me just...
You might the other options you could be thinking of Places Promised in Our Early Days. Maybe that's the other one because that has a lot of pining.
No, oh, you know what it is? It's Voices of a Distant Star,
Oh,
where they're texting and the
two
space and the
things. Oh,
time.
oh,
That's
that
what
is
it is. But it was
probably
still in the same family of
yeah, yeah,
Makoto
exactly.
Shinkai.
Yes,
So obviously, like with 5 centimeters per second, like if anyone hasn't seen this but has, seen like Your Name, the themes of like longing and
yeah,
separation and like what is it called? It's like a misconnections. Like
yes,
another thing on Craigslist, misconnections. Like that is what that feels like, and especially too. I think after this now, like you get in the mood. Like now, I feel like I'm in a mood to watch 5 centimeters per second because I'm thinking about it's a certain feeling that you get, and it's very like it's a very human, but like I feel like nostalgic in a way. Like
hundred
I
percent,
I
hundred
think
percent.
the best way to describe it, it's kind of like you miss something that you never had. Like I feel like I find myself missing something, and it's like this weird feeling. But so with when did you find out about 5 centimeters per second? Like, what was the first time that you watched it?
I watched it during my undergrad years, you and I talked about this earlier. It's like back in the old 807 era, you just see anime titles on the page, and you're just like, I'm gonna just click this and see what happens. And I watched it, and I think what made that movie very important for me emotionally is that I was struggling with the fact that I had moved away from Jamaica. I was in New York at the time. And so the idea of like feeling like I'm going to lose my friends, feeling the miss, like all of that was just like, not even romantically, but just very much emotionally charged in the, like that sense of longing and like miss, all of that. It was just a perfect avatar for those feelings.
And did you go from like, were you like in high school in Jamaica and then you went to college in New York?
Yeah, so I did high school in Jamaica. I did 1 year of high school in New York, and then I did undergrad.
That's such a like pivotal time too, because I feel like when you're younger, like yes, you have connections and stuff, but like that high school is like coming. It's really like that coming of age, and
Yeah.
especially like your senior year, college. Like yes, you've legally turned adult, but you're still like you're not there. Obviously, your frontal cortex is not all the way developed, so I
Yeah.
can see how that time is definitely a time. And being someplace like from Jamaica, I haven't been to Jamaica, but I'm Dominican and I've gone to Dominican Republic. I lived in Dominican Republic and also lived in New York. So it's just two different worlds.
Very much so.
Two completely different worlds. So I can imagine, just the feelings there. So, you watch this, you really relate to it. But when did you know that it was like one of your favorite anime?
I think it's when I started marathoning the rest of Shinkai's work. So I basically was like, I felt this, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And when I started watching, I watched it, Place Promise in Our Early Days, Girl Who Hears of Voices from Deep Below. I watched Voices, I'm like, oh my gosh, is he just making all my favorite anime at the same time? And then what I honed in on is that what the emotions are in 5 centimeters per second do resonate in a way that Place Promise and so forth don't. And I think the one of the things I've grown to learn about myself is like the sense of just emotional resonance could be more important than just the artistic technicality sometimes. I've had folks tell me that they hate 5 centimeters per second because there's no plot or whatever, but it's like you don't get I don't the conveying of pining or the conveying of lost or like the sense of you simply great. It's like the thing that you never had, that conveying that visually, because I mean that's the other thing. It's like Shinkai is just gorgeous, and you just looking at the flowers just fall apart, and you see them running in childhood, and it's like ominous almost of like because you know that means that they are going to separate. Like this moment in time is that snapshot, and so I watched more of his stuff, and I was just like, this is the one. Like I love the other ones, but this one is mine.
I love that you said too that like your favorite isn't necessarily like greatest of all time, and it's more like the emotional connection, because I find that a lot of people like really think that has to go hand in hand, and it's like this may not be like the best thing ever in the entire universe, but that doesn't take away it being like one of your favorites or like how it made you feel. You know, 5 centimeters per second isn't my favorite, but Your Name is, I think, like my
Mhm.
favorite movie, or like my second favorite movie of all time. And it's like what you said, like the emotions of the story, and it just carries you in a way. And I think Makoto Shinkai, especially, like, I feel like he takes these like parts of the story that people kind of don't think about. Like, people think about you get together or you break up. They don't really think about like this longing, like the feelings of longing, or the feeling of, I feel like, particularly with this story, although I haven't, you know, seen the whole thing that I think of, is like the fact that it's not like, oh, happy ending, they get together, and and like he at the end, you know what you're describing, like he thinks he sees her and then the train passes by. It's not like they get back together at the end or something. And it's kind of like also like a little bit larger because he misses her, but not really her, like what that relationship represented at the time of his
Yeah.
life. It's just like the bigger picture. I love that he makes you think about that stuff.
Yeah, and that's I've always feel like Your Name is a transition for Shinkai, and I was like, I think Your Name is great, but I've always felt like he became so much more deliberate about like completing the story, and I think it worked out. But sometimes I like that like hanging feeling of of his older work. I feel like Suzume is a nice balance. I think between both parts of who Shinkai is.
Now that you put it into that perspective, like I see that because I feel like Your Name also has the chance to leave you hanging. Like it is get to that point where you, and so many times you're like, all right, this is it. They never go meet again. Goodbye. And then, you know, they reunite at the end. So I love that you put it that way because I definitely, you know, haven't seen his, like the other one, too. What did we just said what the name was? Voices of a Distant Star, where
Yeah.
you're also kind of like, I just love, in a sense, it's not that I don't think, oh, no, I'm dropping stuff. It's like the imperfect ending, and
Yeah.
imperfect in the way that most people wouldn't choose to end the story that way. And that I feel like resonates with you and kind of leaves you like, damn, like now I'm thinking of that. So you know, this is your favorite anime, especially your favorite work of Makoto Shinkai. Having it be your favorite, what do you think? And I feel like you've talked a little bit about this, but 5 centimeters per second came out in 2007.
Yeah.
And something that people do, I feel like, particularly with movies, is if you see a movie by a director or creator, then you're like, all right, let me backtrack and go back into their other works. So 5 centimeters per second is always being discovered and always, you know, in conversation, either by people who knew about it way before Your Name or anything like that, or people who've discovered it after. But what do you think it is about it? It came out in 2007 that still makes it timeless and still something that people can enjoy today.
I'll start with the one that came to mind. It's still gorgeous. Like it's one of those things. Was like outside of Voices of Distant Star, because that was all him. Like that was him on his laptop. Every other Shinkai film that he's been a part of, I think has held up great. Like I don't think they're going to age. Like you might age style wise or fidelity wise, but I think when I think of the painterly vibes, even some of the kind of haze energy, like I also think it connects to the emotions aspect as well. So like even if it's not like the most fidelity, I think that it conveys the mood. And so it's like I think I would be shocked if someone were to watch 5 centimeters per second and say that it's still not beautiful. Like that is the very first thing. I think to me it is that question of do you prefer that hanging or do you prefer more of a complete thing? Because I'm even thinking about what I said with the girl's vignette, the Kane, where she chose not to share her feelings, but that was a good closure for her to like lean into who she is. And that's like I love. That's honestly that's just one of my favorite tropes. Like it is one of those like you don't get what you want, but you still there's solace in that. And I would even argue I've watched a movie, a Ghibli movie a few years ago, when I realized, oh, Shinkai was studying these guys. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't, I think I've told you my love of Ocean Waves before, and
And that's such a polarizing movie. That
it
is
is.
like, a lot of people don't like that movie at all.
A lot of people don't, and I think I sometimes I look at Fast and Furious per second. I'm like, this is an engagement with that story, and I think some of how it captures like the melodrama and the sense of people not getting what they want and misconnections. Like, I feel like he learned so much from that, and it's like it's so sad to me that that director of Ocean Waves passed away. Like that was really his only work, and so I always think of like Fast and Furious per second is important because I think it sets a domino for all of Shinkai, and then I also think like it's also a response to a different like melodrama or that for a lot of people they don't look for that in Ghibli movies. So I think that's part of why it's contentious.
And I think those standalone Ghibli movies that aren't directed by Miyazaki, I feel like always hit different. Like, because my favorite Ghibli movie is Only Yesterday. And that's another one that's not directed by him. It's actually directed by let me not get to lying out here. He's the one who also
Oh, is it?
directed Fire Grave of the
Grave-
Fireflies, which I
Grave-
have not seen. I'm not trying to ruin my life. Izao Takahata.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one who directed Your Name, and it is those like the different feelings that they capture. Ocean Waves, I don't hate that movie. I actually really liked it, but it is one that if you're expecting the Ghibli like your name, not your name, House Moving Castle or Spirited Away, like you're not gonna get that.
No,
Like it's just one of those. I love what you said of that trope of like not getting what you want, because it's always. I think people don't like seeing that, and I think people don't like a reflection of like their real life.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's very common where you just don't get what you want.
entirely, entirely.
And you don't always have to like, I think especially like love and romance in your teen, like you don't always have to tell them. Like I know people are
Yeah,
like, well, if you don't say nothing, you never know. But sometimes I think you know deep down.
yeah.
Like she knew he was texting somebody. Like she knew he wasn't like about to be there. Be serious, girl. She knew that. That's why she didn't say nothing.
Be for real.
Be for real. She was like, I'm not even gonna waste my time because he's obviously texting somebody else. So with 5 centimeters per second, what do you think is something that people always get wrong about it? Whether it's like a plot point or something with the characters.
That's a good question. I'll tell you something that I realized I got wrong recently, and it took me a rewatch. I was just like, oh, okay, I got that wrong. So, in that moment when he's going to go see her in the snow, he loses his letter, and he goes flying. And he said he'd been scared to write the letter. He'd been writing it and like held it on for 2 weeks. And so there's a moment at the end of the film where, as I said, she finds her letter, and I always used to think that, oh, did she somehow find his letter that he wrote? And I was like, no, that's her letter that she was afraid to share. I was like, oh, okay, that changes the feelings and meaning of that scene a lot for me, because I was like, 'cause thinking about like what would trigger her wanting to re-engage with this person. I was like, if she were able to find those feelings and have words to that, but it is her own words that she found. So that was one of the things where it's like I got caught wrong at first.
I mean, and that feels like it would be something that would happen. Like, that's such a TV movie
That's
thing where it's
really
like she found his letter tucked in the snow years
right.
later.
That's you get exactly where my head was going. That's what I used to assume was happening.
But I do love that it wasn't her letter. I mean, it wasn't his letter.
Right.
Because sometimes I feel like it's also that little bit of like that longing, and this is unrelated, but it reminds me of this BL manhwa that I read, where it's like the second chance trope. So they were together in college, but like they're two different. It worked out, and they got together in adulthood. And when they were together in college, the one guy, he was like rich piano player. The other guy was like poor, working his way to school, whatever. And when he would hang out with the guy, he's just like, I don't know what he sees in me or whatever. Like, we're from two different universes. And he had a journal where he wrote, like, all the questions that he had for him.
Oh.
And then what, like, later, like, a time skip happens because they stop talking or whatever. And then they get back together in the future, and he's like, I left you three things. Like, did you ever find what I left you? And he's like, you know, you left me money, like you left me a ticket to eat at this restaurant I wanted to eat at. And but the third thing the story ends and he never found it. And then you see like a flashback that the piano rich guy found his notebook when they were in college and answered every single question. And then what happened was that like after when he went and he like the poor guy went into the room, it was like a classroom, and somebody was like, oh, like, hey, like, this is your notebook, like, do you want it? He's like, nah, throw it away or whatever. So he never ever saw, like, you know, they spent 10 years apart, and he didn't know, like, he spent the whole 10 years thinking like, oh, he just played with me, like he played with my feelings, and the whole time he felt like just as deeply as him. But it's like that feeling where you're just kind of like, I wish you found the notebook, you would have known.
Yes.
It leaves you like, what if, but it also makes the story like, you don't just magically find somebody's journal with all the answers to everything that you need to know. Yeah. Conveniently, you find a letter with all their feelings.
Exactly. Like, it is that what if of like, what if this happened? Like, what, like that question, I think, for like the audience just gets wrapped up both in just like speculation, but just like the emotions of just like, what if would they have been able to sort things out in a different way? Would they have, yeah.
So with 5 centimeters per second, I love that I can say this title because I've been having episodes where I have not been able to say the worst at pronouncing stuff. So what do you think now is an unpopular opinion that you have that other fans may not agree with you about the movie?
Ooh, that's a good one. This is the weirdest comparison I'll make. It is very 80s movie energy a little bit. Like, I've watched some 80s movies this year, and there's like always these small vignettes of like things to make you feel like you're in the middle of a music video. And
those
obviously,
are the best. I love those.
that's why I was like, sometimes I feel like that's what people don't like appreciate. Like, it is very much of like music video sequence. Like, obviously Shinkai would master that later with the song choices and like Suzume and like, but really, if you appreciate just like the fast forwarding through environments, or if you're willing to just sit with it, you're gonna come out with it with just different energy. I feel like that's the one thing that people don't do. Like, people would probably be like, "Well, that's corny, that's cheesy," or even for those who even like it, it's just like, "Hey, you could have done like more story driven." I was like, "No, that's the core like vibe that he's trying to convey." And so I always think of just like how he goes back and forth between the snow and the blossoms, and yeah. I think that is probably maybe slightly controversial, but it's like, it is 80s movies in the best way.
Somebody better like dox you over this opinion. How dare you think this?
I mean, there's, as I said, it's like, I know there's a negative stereotype on 80s energy, and I was like, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it sometimes, but I'm like, this is the best way, and that's a compliment. It's not a flaw. Like, we should love it because of that vibe.
Yeah, he just has that signature style that, like, it's funny because I had put like Google images up of 5 centimeters per second, and then obviously when you look, it's like results from the internet, so it's also like clips of your name and like in here, and it's like how similar, you know, he's kept his motifs throughout all his work, and even, you know, most recently with Suzume. But I wouldn't have thought of that. But maybe I don't consume a lot of 80s media, so that wouldn't have came to mind for me.
Yeah, as I say, it's been a recent thing. I'm just like, this is just part of that storytelling style, and that's for the best. It's not corny, it is like sentimental. And I feel like sentimental is good. I feel like that's the thing that I always try to like get at, is like, I think Shinkai is always very sentimental with his work, and I wish folks were willing to appreciate that. I always get the impression that it's like, that is the people find that saccharine, they find it mawkish, but I'm like, but I want to feel that. I want to like feel. At least, as I say, it's like, it feels earnest in a way that's like, it's cathartic.
I have his wiki up, and I saw that his birthday just passed, February 9th. I was like, oh, he's an Aquarius. It all makes sense. Like, I get it now because I'm an Aquarius. So, like, I get it now.
Uh-huh.
I think, too, because he does have a movie that I did not get. I did
Uh-huh.
not like. This might be controversial.
Ooh.
Garden of Words. I do not like Garden of Words.
That
Maybe I
is,
need to rewatch it.
I'm surprised because I would say that's his like most technically perfect work. That
I think it's beautiful, right? Like it looks beautiful,
that's really kind of weird.
and maybe it's gonna take me like rewatching it. But I do not like a 15-year-old and a
Yeah, no,
27-year-old teacher hanging out. Like I
that,
just cannot. And this is me, but I
no,
cannot
I
turn
feel you.
off that part of my brain.
That took a long time for me to somehow like come to terms with because I'm like you really try to like, you really want me to like get on board with this moment.
I just can't. Like I do not. Cause I feel like it seemed like it wasn't gonna go in that direction, right? Like I'm just like it doesn't like kind of seems like he has like a crush on her,
Yep, yep.
and then but that's it. Like I feel like it seems like at first like he has a crush on her and she's kind of just like humoring him, but she's like I'm an adult, I'm in control of the
Right.
situation. But then, like, when that other girl confronted her at the school, I was like, girl, stay up. Like, why you, why you going? This is a 15-year-old. Like, this is so weird. I didn't
You
get
know,
it. And you know what? I feel like I just forget that it exists.
un- fundamentally, that is the biggest hurdle for the film. Like, so I'm not mad at you. I feel like they were able to convey like I think it's his tightest film in terms of like conveying emotions and so forth. But I don't blame you. That part of the storyline is just you do it. You're asking me to like forgive a lot, but I do. I think
Yeah, like, you got me suspending disbelief in some areas.
I do think though you've said it a couple of times where sometimes we kind of just accept that the anime space, like what might make for a good story is not what we'd want to condone in real life. I remember you
I
also
said
did that.
absolutely. And I know that people, they be like, Lisa, look at some of the titles on your shelf right now, and you talk about this one thing. Like, I don't have questionable taste. But for something, I think it's just, like, for me with this movie, I think that it was because it, at least when I saw
Yeah.
it, like, I wasn't expecting her to
Hmm.
also, like, and I think it was that. Like, if it knew from the beginning, like, teacher student relationship, like I'd be like, okay, I get it. But it was like, to me it
Right,
just felt
right.
like it wasn't reciprocated right up until the end, and then when it was, I was like, no,
Yeah,
no.
I feel better that she left though, right? Like it's one of those things. I'm just like, if you stayed, I would have been angry. Like, get the fuck out of town. Like I was like, that made me feel a little bit better. I was like, you got out of town. I don't want you to be around this 15-year-old.
I don't. Is that how it ends? I don't remember. Like, I think I was just so mad at that one point where I was like, I feel like I blacked out the ending. Let me look at the Wikipedia. What's that? What's the plot? It says they email each other and see, but they reunite at the end with the shoes. But I guess they didn't stay together in a relationship.
That's a good. Now I have to rewatch it because now I actually don't remember. Because I'm like, I thought she dipped, but you might be right. Now I
Hold
don't.
on. It says after they spend the day together. He confesses his love. She's moved, but she reminds him that she's a teacher. She's moving back to her hometown. See, this is the part that made me upset. She realizes her mistake. That wasn't a mistake. You did the right decision. And runs after him. Still upset. He takes back what he said and criticizes her for being so secretive and never opening up to him. Well, she is a teacher. She embraces him to cry, and she explains that their time together in their park saved her. So he's working towards his goal. She moved back. She does leave, and she moves back and resumes her teaching career. And then in a post-credit scene, he visits the park with a letter, and he places the shoes on the bench and vows that he will find her after he made progress with her career. So that's how the movie ends. But
Okay.
then it says the manga and serial novels, they have differences. So Which I mean makes sense because like he does the movie first and then they
Right.
adapt it into a manga. Um, so it looks like in the manga she's wearing the shoes, and
Okay.
then in the novel, they emailing each other and they reunite.
Oh, that.
So
Oh, damn.
so that's like three different endings.
You see, this is like when I learned the original ending to Usagi Drop, and I was so pissed when I was like, the
Wait,
anime
the original ending to what?
Usagi Drop.
Oh, well,
I
no.
was so damn. I was like, 'cause I love I'm just like, that's what happened. I was so pissed.
Yeah, I now that we've went on that journey
Yeah.
together, which is so necessary for this anime that we talk about something completely else. But I do think all these works tied in
Yeah.
together. But yeah, that's my gripe with the Garden of
Right.
Words, and
That is fair.
I'm okay with understanding that I'm a hypocrite because I understand in other situations. But I also think it was like the feet thing and the shoe
Fair. That is
thing.
that is
And
real. That is real. That is real.
I don't like. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot, and I feel like she was in control. And she could have done a better job, and she
Oh,
did. And she caught herself, and then she's like, "Psych, no, like, girl, stand on what you said.
stand up being a good teacher. Like
Like,
stand
you
up.
27, you old enough. Like, if she was like 23 or 24, not saying that would have been like better, but I would have been like, okay, like
A
you're
little
like
bit more understandable.
right, like you just graduated or something. Girl, 27, get together.
Get it?
Okay, but really get back in.
Yes.
Back to the beautiful five
Yes.
centimeters per second. When you think about 5 centimeters per second, its legacy, what do you think that it is?
Oof. I mean, I think it is the beginning of Shinkai's presence in anime space. I don't. At least my memory, because my memory can be hazy. And like I remember when it dropped, and I'm like, more and more people began to see it, and they began to like recognize how special Shinkai's like filmmaking is. And I don't think we get anywhere close to Your Name or any of that. A, because of the tropes that keep evolving, right? Like we've talked about, like certain things carry through, but I think the prestige that he got prior to that allowed, I think, folks, when he got to that moment to do Your Name, it's because he had been building that name prior in that community. Because I'm like, he and Hosada are roughly what Hosada is probably like 4 years older in terms of work, but I'm like, I think their careers run in parallel.
I love them both.
Yeah.
This is obviously not a
Yeah.
question, but do you think Your Name is the peak? Like, do you think anything better comes after Your Name?
I mean, originally, if you told me, I would have said Garden of Words, but we just had our conversation about that.
No, I mean, if that's what you think, who am I?
That is what I
Don't.
think.
Who am I to
Yeah,
change your mind?
No, I don't think we'll ever get a crowd pleaser like Your Name. I think it's a one of one, and I think it is the best like confluence of who he was, where he's at, and where he was going. I haven't seen yet Weathering with You, so I don't know if people see it in that same light. I know people love Suzume. I like Suzume a lot.
I love Susan. That soundtrack. I got the art book, but I love Susan. It's hard. I think anybody like once you create that universally loved work, and I'll never forget watching Your Name, and like I remember every time I've seen it because I've seen it like 3 or 4 times. I've seen it in English. I've seen it in like subbed. And I just like I've seen it in like whenever it comes back in theaters, I go and watch it, and
Yes.
it's like it's a feeling that can't be replicated.
Yes.
I really like Weathering with You, but it's hard no matter what project you put out after Your Name, like
Yeah.
like it's Your Name.
I also think it dropped right at because that's 2016. Am I right? Do I have it right for the right year?
For
Your Name.
maybe hold on, cause let me go back to my Wikipedia.
Yes.
So Your Name was 2016, and then Weathering with You was 2019.
I also think part of the hit that Your Name has is like it was right after the first real like or the next anime boom, like around 2012 is where I always like that's the guys who are just a little bit younger than me, like that's their year, and so I'm like I feel like Your Name hit that market perfectly. Because I'm like, before that, I'm like, what anime movie in the 2000s hit the same way that Your Name hit in the 2010s? And I'm like, I can't think of it, but I was like, it would have been speaking to a different audience at that time. I'm like, I feel like Your Name is like the perfect zeitgeist movie because it's technically great, but I'm like, it also hits the new demographic who are here in many ways. And I'm like, I don't think you can do that twice.
Yeah, and I just feel like Your Name is it's just something about the way that you think the story is going a certain way and then it doesn't, and I feel like it pulls it very hard. Like I feel like if you're driving and somebody pulled up the e-brake and you're just like stop. And I think the magic in Your Name is that it like from the beginning, like you really think oh, this cute funny body swap comedy, and then it's that point where it's not, and then
Yeah.
it's like it feels like irreparable, like somebody punched you and just left a hole, and like the way that like the audience finds out that it's not this cute body swap romance, that
Mm,
is so jarring in how it's done. I think in Your Name is really what, at least in my opinion, like why it hits so different, because it
you're right.
truly is. And then it takes a couple of rewatching it. Then this is spoiled. I mean, obviously we've spoiled
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
here, but we spoiled every single Makoto Shinkai movie. But it's like that when you rewatch it and you see that it was there all along, that they weren't on the same time, like that to me when I was rewatching it, because I remember I first saw it. Forgive me, anime people, I do not pirate stuff now, but back in the day I first saw it like pirated whatever at home, and then maybe like 2-3 months later they brought it, because I didn't see it in 2016, at least I don't think I maybe saw it in 2017. And then they brought it in theaters, and then I saw it in theaters, which was like such a different experience. Cause I was home like sobbing my eyes out, but then when I saw it in theaters, and I'm like, it was there. Like it was there. Like it was. He was looking at stuff. This said this
Yeah.
hex thing happened. Like it was all there. It was where she lived. It was okay. I'm done. This is not about Your Name. Um, but that's what I feel like, and I think like looking at his whole body of work, because he also has She and Her Cat, which I'm pretty sure I've seen some of that. Voices of a Distant Star is also that like timey. I don't really like timey stuff movies. Like
Mm,
we not on the same time. Like it's just crazy. But I digress. I've gotten off track
you're
with
good.
this
You're good.
episode. But that's bound to happen when you're talking about
Yeah.
Makoto Shinkai, because I feel like yes, 5 centimeters per second. Obviously, it's a standalone movie. All the movies are
Yeah.
a standalone movie, but it really is a timeline of his
Yeah.
progression, and like I feel like you almost can't talk about one of his movies without
Yes.
referencing the other movies. I mean, he also does Easter eggs where the characters are in the other movies and stuff. But it's just such a like his work is definitely up there, and I really like Suzume. I don't think it comes like close in the sense of what Your Name's impact
Oh,
was, but it's really really good. Like
I,
it's so good.
it is good. It's hard to show me, but it's like he is evolving as a filmmaker because I'm like, it feels like he's now. He will always have his tropes and things that he comes back to, but I'm like, oh, he's trying new things, or he's playing with new elements here, and so yeah, I'm
I'm
excited.
surprised you haven't seen Weathering with You.
I know that I need to fix. That I need to fix.
Watch it today. Watch it. Just do an amendment. Because I feel like Weathering with You, I know it's like, I also don't care what people say, because, like, listen, I have some anime that I love that people hate. And that's my business. But Weathering with You is visually, like, has a lot of the same visual elements, but really is a big departure
Really?
from
Okay.
Your Name. Like, I don't think it's like the same in like this longing and like
Oh,
like as I feel like in the same as 5 centimeters per second and Your Name, like there's a sense of longing because they're not together, where
yeah.
I feel like in Weathering with You they're together almost the entire time,
Oh,
and then like something happens and then they're like not together, but is working on getting back together. But it's definitely like very story wise, it has a lot of elements that are very different from the other movies, and I think it is a really great like follow up to your name because it doesn't do what your name did. But
Okay.
I think a lot of people don't feel that way because, he has his signatures with like the rain and the skies and the beautifulness. So I feel like that's why it always gets muddled. But I also love weather. I've seen it in theaters twice. Like I originally started in theaters and then it came back like 2021, and I was like, I gotta go again and see it. Like you just have to watch his movies full screen. But as we're wrapping up, because I could talk about Makoto Shinkai and everything
We can.
together. Are there any fun facts that you know about 5 centimeters per second or Makoto Shinkai that you'd like to share with the class?
I don't know if I know any fun facts. I don't. Yeah, I don't. I will say no. I don't know if I know any fun facts.
Me either.
Yeah,
I do not. But
uh,
there may be some people like this. I could do more research and find out of that. So as we are wrapping up, I just want to thank you so much for joining me today on this conversation. I feel like I would want to marathon his work, but I don't feel like that is the best idea to respect each individual movie or video as its own standalone thing, because I really feel like yes, there's a lot of elements that carry, as we said, like that carry throughout all his films, but I think you really need to see them separately.
yes.
Like to have that understanding of each of its purposes. But I do really want to revisit, especially Voices of a Distant Star and 5 centimeters per second, because they're different. They are different.
No, I think it's one of those things where you probably wouldn't want to marathon it all in one day, but I feel like if you were to like for the next 6 weeks, every Friday you knock out a film, I feel like you get the connections and then you'd be able to say, okay.
Like you have time to separate.
Right.
Yes.
You have time to separate them and time to feel all the, like, because the last thing you want is the feelings to like blend into one another.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Is there anything that you want to promote or where we should be following you? What's next for The Wolf's Den and Menu Combat or any other projects you have?
So I'm hoping that by April I'll begin recording the second season of Menu Combat. So that is the intention. I've been trying to put my ducks in a row. So by then you'll at least have a filler episode. That is one of the plans, because I'm like, if I'm finishing a game, I should have a filler episode. So that will be happening. If you ever want to find my my music, just find me on YouTube, The Wolf's Den 25. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky. I think that's every Instagram.
Not Blue Sky.
The social media game is starting to change so much. Those are, I think, the main things. And I guess the thing I would love to open up is like, for those who have listened to this and end up coming over to Menu Combat, is there a RPG you'd want me to play? Like, I would love to talk with people about stuff that they're playing and just hear and play stuff so that I continue to explore as well. Like, I always feel like that's the spirit to be curious rather than like, oh, I know everything. It's like, I don't know everything. I barely
We're
scratched.
just trying.
Exactly. And so those are the things. Oh, I'd have one more thing to say about 5 centimeters per second. My brain is like, if you go back and watch it, pay attention to how everything is first person narrated and how he brings together her narration, his narration together. It's one of his filmmaking techniques that don't really follow. Not that it doesn't follow through, but it's like he does that so elegantly here. Like, I feel like, yeah, that's something that's on my mind. I'm like, that first person narration and how intertwined he brings those together is so lovely. But yes, Menu Combat, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Yes. So.
And I will have links to everything.
Yes.
Maybe not Blue Sky, but I will have links to everything because I don't have Blue Sky account. How am I gonna find it? I'll have links, all your links, in the description of this episode. For anybody else, thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Wonder of Anime. And if you like it, you love it, share it. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to comment, join the conversation. I love your thoughts. I love, engaging with people after the show and, your thoughts about what we thought. But yeah, we'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace out.